Let's talk about recurrence and reoccurrence of a health condition today. Okay, so when I was writing my book, Healing Beyond the Diagnosis, there were a few words that when I would write them out, read them, and then eventually got to spoken form, I was like, I don't actually know if there are two different words here and if they have the same meaning. And so the two words were recurrence and reoccurrence. And so you might see in places in my social media or when I'm speaking, I talk about reoccurrence and I put the O in brackets because this covers recurrence and it also covers reoccurrence. So in my search on the interwebs using the dictionary, I found out that recurrence is something that keeps on recurring in a very predictable way. So it's like you know that you have a Netflix subscription and that is going to be recurring on a monthly basis. If we bring it back to health, and I will use my story. Back in the day, over a decade ago, when I got quite sick with my health crisis, it was almost so predictable that every couple of weeks, only on my 3 days off, that I would get sick. I would get a cold, I would get the flu, I would get this, what I called a random fever back then. It was just so predictable. And it felt random at that time before I knew what it really meant. So think about for yourself, do you have something that keeps on recurring? Is it a rash? Is it a pattern with your condition, your diagnosis? Okay. And then what is reoccurrence? Reoccurrence is usually that you have been free of the thing for such a long time. This could be weeks, months, or years. And then all of a sudden, you didn't expect it, but it comes back. That is reoccurrence. And so if can't think of a real life sort of example there. You let me know if you think of one. But I see this a lot in the cancer space. And so most of the people I work with, they do want to have no evidence of disease or they want to be clear. There are some people that I love to work with and they are more about coming to peace with the relationship that they have and the coexistence with their cancer. I'm always open to any possibility that I will also meet people with where they are at on their journey, particularly if I'm working with people who have been diagnosed as terminal. Okay. We can still do beautiful work together. But it's very common in the cancer space, and I'm going to say also other um, conditions that people have, like autoimmune conditions, is having this fear of it coming back. And what I'm going to say is it's a fear of reoccurrence because remember, recurrence is predictable, reoccurrence isn't predictable. And so you may be clear, but I've met so many people where they're like, the fear of it returning is coming back. And that's where I ground them into look at the work that you've done to get to this point of all clear. What is the changes it is asking you to embrace in a more sustainable way out of love and care for yourself, not out of fear of pain or trying to help your health, your diagnosis improve? Okay. And being in this space for over a decade, I have actually, and I want you to know that if you're someone who fears the reoccurrence or cancer returning, is that I have people that really do truly get to the point where there is no fear of it reoccurring. And this can happen at any timeline. For me, I really see it reflected in the work that they do. Okay. So before I get into really unpacking these further, I'm just going to touch base if there's something that I need to revisit around the recurrence. I think it's more the reoccurrence that I want to speak to today. And overall, hopefully you guys know by now that my work is rooted in the power of processing your emotions. So emotions is the root cause, but that's actually kind of superficial. That's the awareness piece. The missing link is processing your emotions. And the key that unlocks everything is the ability to decipher the message behind your experience, whether that be a chronic health issue, a diagnosis, a complex problem, or a repeating pattern in your life that you know could be broken. And it's led you to the world of emotions. This is where everything starts for me. Now, it's probably only gotten quite clear for me because I've been in this work for so long, the repeating patterns, the structure, the process that goes with it, that I want to share this with you, not to make it sound more complex, but I will always come back to if you don't know where to start, just start with processing your emotions. If you hear these amazing stories of my clients, or even people that I might interview on the podcast. It's been a while since I've interviewed people that I haven't worked with, but I'm getting more people that I've worked with, and they've been with me for a while, and they were getting breakthroughs and navigating massive challenge at the same time. And now, with all these years gone by, their results seem so massive. And I just want to let you know that some of them thought that this wasn't possible for them, and then they became the stories that I share. So if you feel like you're thinking this isn't possible for me, I want you to know, they want you to know it is possible for you. And everything for them just started with processing their emotions. Okay, so um, with I'll use my story and I'm going to use a couple of client stories that have either been interviewed, they're in my book, or I've shared about them on a masterclass um, with permission. I feel the stories is what's going to help anchor this in. So I talked about me getting sick on a recurring basis, right? And I only want to touch on my story lightly because it can seem like I'm just conjuring this up to help you help you see the root of this. But when you can see that it also is a tangible result for other people, that's when it really lands. Okay, so I had my recurring sickness. But also another recurring thing was my skin. And that was probably the primary area of my body, my barometer that would spoke to me from a very young age, but I would ignore it. So I just kind of felt like I was destined to be someone that was going to have skin issues. But I finally broke that pattern, that cycle. And it all started with processing my emotions and be able to decipher my unique experience as to why my skin was causing me the physical and the psychological pain that it was. Okay. And so every now and then, if I would be clear and then it would come back, sometimes disappointment would rise up. And then I knew that that was another layer to dive into. And this is what I want to really share with you around recurrence and reoccurrence. Recurrence is that you have got to do the emotional work and you've got to find out what the message is so that you know what is going to be your unique answer, your message from within to get you unstuck and to move you forwards. Like, what is it that you need to change? So if you've got recurrence, you've just got to start processing your emotions. You do have to make some sort of change. Now, sometimes the awareness of the message is enough to create change. And for others, you actually need to implement it. And that's why I say someone else seeing exactly what you need to do can be so triggering and activating. And that's because it might be true. But until you come up with a message from within, you're probably not going to make any change. Okay. So that's the recurrence part. It's just come to me as I've been speaking through. Okay. Now, reoccurrence. This is where hopefully my story, but more so the story of clients that I share really inspires you. And so when I see people navigate a reoccurrence, it's not that the emotional work hasn't worked. It's their barometer. It's their area that will speak to them when things are out of alignment. And I say, don't worry. You have once upon a time had this recurring issue disappear. You got to remember what got you there. Usually processing your emotions. If this comes back, you are now confident to embrace this challenge. You know the right tool to use at the right time. Because as you are walking the path of taking steps in alignment with the future version of yourself, it's not unusual for new challenges, fears, and questions to come up and for old patterns to arise. But remember not to say to you that what you've done hasn't worked. It's just asking you to go another level deeper. So, for any of you who are like real masters at anything, you'll know that you started somewhere and that through opportunities and experiences, you've been able to refine whatever your process is that you're a master at and go deeper and deeper and deeper. So, keep going. This work actually works. It's gotten you to where you're at. And this is just asking you to step into a new identity, find out what that new message is, find out what that new move is. Okay. So, a couple of stories that I share is one of the amazing Johnny. Like, if you are in groups with me and you know Johnny, you have seen the journey that he has been on. And he is one of the people that came into the emotional world because his doctor recommended, I think you need to look at your emotions. And he crossed paths with me. And he had this rash that would come to the surface of his skin. It really looked like blood coming right to the surface. It wasn't just pink, it was deep, like bruising red. And every time it would flare up in a very predictable way, he would go to the doctor and be put on painkillers, antibiotics, and prednisone. So, pretty strong medication. And through the emotional processing, he made a number of other incredible changes in his life. His story is in Healing Beyond the Diagnosis. He made incredible changes in his life, but it was within less than a year, he was actually able to diminish this skin rash to a very like small amount, less intense, less frequent, more localized as well. And then within a year, it actually disappeared. And then we're in this holding pattern of, is it going to come back? Keep doing the work. And he is just someone who keeps on leaning into the work, not in a really hard way, but in a very curious way. And so we actually went about 2 to 3 years without this rash. And then there was something medical that was introduced to his body. And I see that as a physiological stress, and his rash came back. So when he shared about the rash coming back, and this is the time where I wanted to write about his story in my book, he said, well, I don't know. I don't know if I should be in your book because it's come back. I'm like, Johnny, this is 3 years on, and he's still in one of my groups. So we had an opportunity to chat about it. And I said, look, you just had this physiological stress. This is your weak spot. It's asking you to go deeper. You've been so amazing, and look at how your life has opened up over the last 2 to 3 years. Now, this is just asking you to be curious on another layer. And he processed, and a lot of our work is now through conversation and coaching. And his world has just opened up over the course of that following year in the most wonderful and unexpected ways. Like, I don't think he realized that he would be living the life the last few years the way that he has when we first met. Okay, so I'm not going to go into exact details, that those who are in groups and just know Johnny, like we cheer him on. We love his shares. We love his questions. I love his questions because he just asks them, even though they don't even make sense to him, and it reveals the next piece. And so he's been free of this rash for a very long time, and his life has opened up in incredible ways. And I always love to say, Johnny is a male. He's in his 60s. He's a grandparent. He's retired, and he's still choosing to do this work. So, that was a recurrence. After many years of being free of this, his body just spoke. He had the tools. He just needed to be reminded because it had been a while since he had called on these tools to go a level deeper and explore what is the message in this old pattern coming up? What is the next level? Okay, so I do have a podcast episode where I recorded in depth about my old pattern, next level coming up, and what it taught me and what I was actually navigating. So I'm really, really transparent about my stories, because I know that I've got full permission for that. And then there's another wonderful woman, Susan Harrington, who's been on the podcast twice. And I said to her, it's really her and Johnny that helped me in the work, in the process of this work, land on this recurrence, reoccurrence type theme. And I just really want to acknowledge both of you, Johnny and Susan, for teaching me so much, because the people that I work with, you do teach me so much, and I want to give you so much credit for this. So you will hear Susan's two really in-depth podcast episodes. The first one was at the end of 2023, where she received no evidence of disease for her breast cancer journey. And then I believe we recorded another one in 2024 or even in 2025. Timelines get a little bit blurry because she did have a reoccurrence. And I was working with Susan during this time, and it's really wonderful to have these two podcast episodes to actually go on the journey with people because I see that a lot of the time people don't want to share their story because they're in a state of fear that it's going to come back, that they're going to have a reoccurrence. And then if they do have a reoccurrence, they're like, I don't want to mislead people. But I'm not trying to mislead you. I'm trying to share with you, tell you that this is where the work is at, is that emotional work helps you have the confidence to embrace any challenge. So once upon a time, I used to feel like that was actually one of my things. What if I am bringing this client on board and they've had amazing results, but then the results don't stick? And again, what I'm going to say, and I hope this doesn't offend anyone that I have worked with before, is that if you've got a reoccurrence, ask yourself, have you come back to use the same tools that got you to the good place you were at when you were in my world? And it's not that I ever want you to be dependent on me because there's a stage and a phase where you're happy, healthy, and you're manifesting like crazy, but that's also still where you get support. Okay, because we know behind the scenes that even though we're manifesting incredible things in our lives, there's still challenges. And when challenges pop up and pain pops up, sometimes it can be, what is it, hard to see the wood for the trees? That's the saying. Okay, so yeah, Susan, she navigated a reoccurrence and she navigated the next level that it was asking her to go deeper, new decisions, new grounded decisions for her to make. Not saying that they were easy. We recorded this in the second podcast. I'm going to have to remember to put these links in. She's also a story in healing beyond the diagnosis. And now, once again, she has no evidence of disease. So these are people that have stayed in the world of this work and stayed very present with it. We know that challenges come up and old patterns can return. And it's not that the work hasn't worked. It's not that this emotional work doesn't work. Ask yourself, where is it asking you to go a level deeper? What is the next message, the next identity shift that comes from within where it's no longer about staying comfortable in this discomfort, this current reality, but how is it that I can move away from this and step into the unknown? And emotional work helps you to have the capacity to handle the unknown, the reality of what you're yet to actually live in your life. So, this is going to be called reoccurrence with the O in a bracket to cover recurrence and reoccurrence. Um, it started to come clearer to me as I was speaking to it. And I know that this is something that just in the recent probably 6 months, I've really landed on. And so it's whenever I see really clear patterns showing up or I hear myself repeating myself in the groups that I'll bring something like this to you in the podcast. And this is where I say, when you're in groups with me, you see it happen, the intellectual aspect of what I'm trying to describe to you actually lands in the experience because intellectual is keeping you in the head. Experiences are putting you and placing you in your body. And that's what we've got to combine, the mind and the body experience. So, recurrence, recurrence, in summary, recurrence is a repeating, predictable pattern that sometimes you might get complacent about, but it is calling you to do the emotional work, to process your emotions from past experiences and events, even maybe about the condition, and decipher the message. How is it that your body is trying to speak to you? If only you could listen, if only you could learn this language of your body. And this is where I say the release process is the translator. So that's what you do if you've got a recurring problem. Please don't live with it anymore because your body and your life is going to speak to you in more and more ways, knocking on your door until you listen. Reoccurrence is a little bit less predictable. You may have resolved your pain in your life, whatever that be, in your health or other life areas. And you may sit in a space for weeks, months, or years of, is this going to come back? A fear of reoccurrence. And when it does come back, it's unpredictable. That's what a reoccurrence is that you're really hoping it didn't. You were fearful that it did, and maybe that's why it did, because you had that subconscious fear, and that's where your attention was going. Just going to throw that in there. Um, but what it is saying to you is not that the work you've done hasn't worked and that you need something new, but it's just asking you to go a level deeper with that work. And so in my world, it's go a level deeper with processing your emotions. And usually by the time people have resolved stuff, we're then working on the next piece, which is the visions, the desire, the manifestation piece. And this is a reminder, if you've been in my world and you've had great results, it felt like magic, and then you haven't been able to sustain it, ask yourself, have you kept yourself accountable to processing your emotions? Do you actually know what you've got to process on? Is the sneaky human getting in the way? Have you kept yourself accountable to the vision, the desire, the manifestation piece? Because I know even my clients that I'm working in close proximity with, they admit that they love it when there is allocated time for us to work on it, to make them sit down and actually do the work, to lead themselves. And it's okay. That's why I say, even if you're in the happy and healthy state and the manifesting state, it's still so valuable to have support. And if anything, it is lighter touch support and is the continuing of playing in the pleasure and holding the expansion and the challenge at the same time. Okay, so recurrence, reoccurrence, which one are you experiencing? Is it that you've got to start the work, or is it that you've got to revisit the work? And either way, ask yourself, if you're trying to do this alone, is one of the changes you've got to make to actually ask for support. All right, let me know how this episode lands, which one speaks to you. Maybe both. I'd love for you to share your experience with me. You can reply to the email. Or even better, I prefer if you get in touch with me on social media. And yeah, speak to me of your experience of this reoccurrence theme that has been popping up in my life. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.